Today's webinar is all about working from home and establishing a new normal. So we'll really be focused. This webinar is for employees and employers, but we're also really wanting to focus on what are the rights and responsibilities of the two parties. So we are experiencing unprecedented change. I know this hasn't happened in my lifetime, so it's important that we acknowledge that, but we also keep businesses moving and adapting as best as we can. We really want to ensure that teams across the globe and across our community are set up for success. And that's why we've brought Kateena in today. So to get through all the nitty-gritty details, we've got Kateena, as you can see, and she is a people and culture consultant from Club Sandwich HR. I've known Kateena for a couple months now, but I did a LinkedIn stalk and didn't realize how many years she'd been in the industry. So she's got over 12 years experience. Don't let her youthful face. And she's worked both in Australia and in the UK. So she's worked for PHP, she's worked for Kathy Reed's Icon Cancer Group, she's worked for Busy Industries, and also marketing and advertising giant Havas in the UK. And then she moved to the consulting and agency side, starting at What's Next before going out on her own and creating Club Sandwich HR, who just had their first birthday. Yeah. So she has an absolute wealth of experience. And I'm so excited to shortly turn off my camera so you can just see her glorious face. But I will be popping back on once she's finished the presentation, and then we can do questions from there. But yeah, I'm going to turn everything over to Kateena now.
Cool. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for coming along, and to those who are watching a little later, I hope that you get some value out of this as well. As Carly said, basically what we'll do today is I'll take you through a short presentation of some of the key things that I kind of think are important in this space, and then we'll do some questions at the end. So please, if you think of anything as we're going through, pop it in the chat or the Q&A box. I think there's two separate ones. We'll have an eye on both of those. Or if obviously you've sent through questions previously, then we'll be jumping onto them as well. Hopefully I might touch on some of those questions throughout, but if there's anything that people have or want to ask more specifically, then definitely do that. Also, I'm going to pop my email address at the end. So if there's any questions that you have that are really specific to your business, I'm really happy to answer those. If not today, it'll be kind of over the weekend that I'll get back to you, and happy to kind of talk quite specific if that's necessary, because obviously in the HR space at the moment, things are changing a lot, and a lot of stuff really is kind of case by case and really business specific. So some things that we might talk about generally might not be quite applying to you. So happy to dive into a bit more detail individually if that's needed. So let me just try and get to the next slide. There we go. Okay. So I kind of wanted to talk in three broad areas today when looking at working from home and the rights and responsibilities associated with that. So first up, we're going to look at workstation and environment. That's kind of the nuts and bolts part, and the bit that a lot of people probably have either sorted now or are starting to realize that they probably don't have it quite set up the way they need. The next one is connection, which obviously is a super important part when everyone is self-isolating and not getting to see their work colleagues, but also people that they would normally see in their personal lives. So having a look at how we can help from a business perspective in that area, and then obviously just well-being in general as well. So first up, I just wanted to kind of talk about, I guess, broadly the employer and employee relationship, and essentially there's no change to that. So basically, everything that happened in the office and the responsibilities that your employer had and that you had as an employee in the office is still the same now that you're working from home. It's just that we're in a different setting. So your employer still has, or if you are an employer, you still have a duty of care over your employees. And from a work health and safety perspective, that basically means that you're responsible for the health and safety, and that's physically and psychologically for your employees during work time. And now work time is obviously bleeding into personal time a lot more. Our work days are not necessarily the kind of 8, 9 to 5. They're kind of looking at a much longer time period to fit around other things that are happening in our lives. And I'll talk about that a little bit as well. but important for employers to understand that just because they're not sitting in front of their employees anymore, that duty of care is still there. And as well for employees, you are still responsible to be taking care of yourself as an employee, as you always have that responsibility, and also to be caring for others around you. So not putting other people into situations where they are unsafe. So again, whether that's physically or psychologically. So I'll talk about that a little bit more as well. So as I said, the kind of workstation and environment kind of side of things is probably something that most people have already had to get sorted, because most people that are going to be working from home have already made that transition. Generally, if people have worked from home before, they will have probably gone through some kind of ergonomic checklist, which might be quite involved around a whole lot of different aspects of making sure your chair height and seat back and all of these things are all in different positions. You've got your monitor and your screen and your height set up and all of the bits and pieces that you might need to be able to make it a lovely ergonomic experience. Obviously, with a huge volume, this is probably something that's maybe taken a step back in a lot of businesses, or businesses that haven't had people work from home before have literally not got these things in place. What I have tried to do with some of our clients is to be realistic about what these workstation setup expectations are, considering that I know for myself and for a lot of friends of mine, our work from home station is potentially our couch or our bed, or kind of depends how you're feeling on the day. It might be a breakfast bar in your kitchen. It's kind of moving around, but looking at having a dedicated space that is your official workstation so that you can set that up properly, and giving as an employer that's the safest place that it can be. And so I've put together a bit of a checklist, and again, I'm really happy to share this with people. If you want to email me, I can send it to you. It's very basic, it's literally in Word, but it's talking about things like making sure that you're setting stuff up at certain heights and things like that, and how you should be feeling when you're sitting, without necessarily needing to have a whiz-bang chair and things like that. So we're trying to be realistic and balance what people can actually get a hand on at the moment, with the requirements of kind of, I guess, having that duty of care for employees. Some things to consider for your work environment is obviously having as little distraction as possible. And I think that we'll probably talk about kids being around the house a little bit later as well. But that's obviously one thing to try and juggle. And I think unrealistic to say that we're going to be able to shut the door and they're just going to be outside doing their own thing. So having as little distraction as possible, being able to have a dedicated space for that is really important. Having the appropriate lighting and ventilation is really important, and making sure obviously that you're considering trip hazards and things like that probably you normally would be in your house anyway, but just making sure that we're minimizing any of those risks associated with kind of workplace injuries that still are considered workplace injuries even though you're at home. So that's something to consider, I suppose, if you haven't thought about that from a workers' compensation perspective. The workplace, if it's at home, is still the workplace, and so accidents that might happen or injuries that might be incurred still can fall under workers' compensation. As an employer, putting some of these ergonomic assessments and self-assessments of your workstation in place can help to reduce your risk or your liability in those situations. So the next piece is that connection. And so I think something that's important, and again, there's a lot of businesses in lots of different situations at the moment. Some people are super busy, and so they're just cracking on with their normal work and just trying to get through and keep up with all of the demand. Other people are kind of feeling that slowdown, and it's maybe moving on to the projects that have been sitting on the back burner for a while, or doing things that it's like, oh, maybe research this, or hey, could you work on that? That they're a little bit more vague, but trying to keep people busy. Trying to give people meaningful work, and if it's something that isn't urgent, putting some deadlines in place to give people that motivation. Carly and I were talking just before that we're very deadline driven, and if there's not deadlines in place, then it's kind of a bit like, oh, well, if it doesn't happen today, it can happen next week. So by being able to put some of those deadlines in place and keep people accountable, that can help people's motivation and productivity as well. Connection to the team is obviously really important, and I think probably in the questions section we might talk a little bit more about some ideas of how people are keeping connected, but obviously things like team meetings, video conferences, things like that are really important to be able to keep connecting people together. If you're using Slack or Teams or Google Hangout, some kind of chat function, to keep people having some of that banter that they normally would in the office is really important. And then the third piece here is really not ideally something that we would want to have to consider or think about, but it's that already feeling isolated and separated from some of their support networks is when things like bullying can become really easy and can go unnoticed in a lot of instances. So it's really important that, particularly when people are isolated, that managers are keeping on top of things like conversations that might be happening that seem a little bit passive aggressive, and just jumping on top of that stuff before it gets too far. Obviously, a lot of people are feeling stressed and sensitive at the moment as well, so it's really important to be keeping those communications lines open to make sure that people know that they've got support within the business if they're feeling like any of these things are occurring. Withholding information is something that most people wouldn't probably consider bullying, but is actually falls within that definition if it's done on a repeated basis, but is obviously something that's easy to do when you're not seeing each other face to face as well. So it's something you can easily be like, oh, I missed that email. If that's starting to happen a lot, that can really affect people and the work that they're doing. So it's important for managers to kind of keep on top of these things. Like I said, keep communication lines open, which then means people might feel more comfortable to come forward if they're having any of these kind of issues. And now well-being. So again, well-being is like been a bit of a buzzword for the last few years, but it's kind of that all-encompassing thing, something that employers used to be like, cool, that's something for you to take care of in your own time and we don't need to worry about it. But again, I think it's something that's becoming more and more of an actual responsibility for employers to take a handle of, and particularly in these times where we are seeing more and more people either experiencing mental health issues or the mental health issues that they have are kind of coming to the forefront because of things like isolation and the uncertainty in the world. And so I think it's really important for employers to get in touch with a few of these areas. There's a lot of things that you can do either for free or very low cost. So I think it's a great opportunity to have some fun with your team in different ways. Whether that's looking at, okay, we all have our stand-up team meeting and we do some stretches at the start, or we have some, yoga that we all do together at a certain time of the day, or we do, push-up challenges and all of those kind of things. If it's incorporating some of that into the workday and encouraging that within your team, then I think that's a really good thing to do. Obviously, things like mindfulness and meditation and looking at incorporating that into your day as well is really important. And I think as well, sharing activities within your team that people are doing potentially outside of work. Obviously, a lot of people will be talking to other people. They're going to be finding games online and puzzle subscriptions and a whole lot of different things that they might be doing, and looking at trying to incorporate some of that either into work or giving people the space to share some of those ideas with their colleagues so that they have a bit more up their sleeve of what to potentially bored and separated from everyone. So I think that's kind of the key things that I wanted to cover off first. And then there's obviously some more stuff that we'll go through with some questions, and I can probably give a bit more detail and some answers and some ideas of things that I've seen other people do or that I've heard of other businesses implementing that seem to be working well. So I don't know if you want to jump back on, Carly, and we can go through some of those questions. Just while we're waiting, I'll just, there's obviously my email address. So if anyone would like this working from home self-assessment, I'm happy to send that through. Or like I said, if you've got any questions, I might just start having a chat about some of the ideas or activities that I've seen people doing, and then we can get going into some questions after that. But one of the things I think is really important is to keep up any rituals or traditions that you already had within your team. So if there's things, if you used to always have a drink together on a Friday before everyone kind of headed home, then try to incorporate that into your day. If you had morning teas for birthdays or anniversaries and things like that, then trying to look at ways to incorporate that still, I think, is really important, to be able to maybe suggest that people bake something themselves, or if they all just jump on a Zoom call and sing happy birthday or something like that might be a nice way of kind of keeping people connected. Another thing that a lot of businesses and kind of celebrities or D-list celebrities are doing is having like dress up days and different themes every day, whether it's wear a funny hat or have crazy hair or crazy socks or whatever. These things that kind of seem a bit lame can be a bit of fun for people and kind of give people a bit of a chance to forget some of the worries I think that they've got going on and be able to have that connection with each other. It's something that you can get your kids involved in as well. If you've got kids that might be around, they can jump in on team meetings and show everyone their crazy hat as well and feel like they're a bit of a part of your work too, which might help out with being able to balance that work and life and parenthood and managerial responsibilities all together. Hello.
Alrighty, hi, just a couple technical difficulties. Can you, okay?
Yes, it's a little bit delayed, but I think that's all good.
Alrighty, how's that? Is that better?
That's good, yeah.
Apparently MacBook Airs can't handle the volume of a webinar, so my whole computer just overheated. And let's go to some questions. So if you haven't already popped your questions in, but we will be also answering the questions from everyone that was submitted earlier before this webinar started. So question number 1 is, anyone can jump on a Zoom call, but I'm really interested in hearing about the ideas people have had or things that people have been doing that feed in the need for social interaction, either with teams, peers, or friends.
Yeah, cool. So some of those things is similar to what I talked about, but I think otherwise things like apps like House Party, obviously Zoom is a good one. House Party is fun if you haven't already got on that. There's like, you can do trivia and like Pictionary and stuff in there with a bunch of people. So obviously that can be something that you use for work catch-ups as well. Another business that I work with, they had implemented before we obviously all went online, they implemented like a donut catch up where the company would shout people donuts and like they would pair off into people that they wouldn't normally work with necessarily, and they would go and eat a donut together. So I think you could definitely do something like that online, which is maybe getting people together that they don't generally work together or they don't have a project they're working on together. Give them kind of permission to have a half-hour chat and they have a coffee together on video conference somehow and just talk about life stuff with people that they don't generally chat with. And so I think just thinking of ideas of how to incorporate some of that stuff where it's not always about work will help to have some of those things that you might have already run into that person in the kitchen and had a bit of a chat to them. For example, we're trying to kind of replace some of those aspects, I suppose. But I think if people are feeling isolated, reach out. There's a lot of other people feeling that way, but sometimes they're not going to be the one to kind of say hey first. So I think definitely kind of jumping out, and as a manager, forcing that a little bit might be a good idea too. So saying, hey, you and you, tomorrow you're having a half-hour coffee together, that can start to kind of help perpetuate some of that chatter and get people talking.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. Also, so just going back to that kind of work from home setup, what are companies doing in terms of supporting their staff with reasonable working from home setups and equipment? So for example, are companies paying for these items, or are they referring people to make, like, buy them now, but make it part of their taxable expense, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I think a lot of businesses are kind of being like, take your at work setup home where that's possible. Obviously, if people are commuting and they've got to take an iMac screen and a chair and stuff, that gets a bit tricky. But I've seen a lot of people kind of saying, yeah, we're going into our office to grab a chair today and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that's kind of a popular choice, considering people aren't going to be in the office for a period of time. So that seems to be a good solution. Otherwise, obviously checking with your manager that it's okay for you to purchase something. If you're like, look, I'm working on a laptop and I just really need an external keyboard and mouse. This is the one that I found. This is how much it is, and getting that approval, obviously, before you expect that it's going to be reimbursed. But that is definitely another way that people are dealing with it. So kind of either taking stuff from work that's already there, or doing that reimbursement is another option as well. Obviously keeping in mind that a lot of businesses are doing it pretty tough at the moment. So adding as little extra expense as possible is probably the aim at the moment.
Of course. And something that you said there, I think is really important too. Like, go do the research for that keyboard you want or you need, and then present that to your boss, rather than just saying, I need a keyboard, but not presenting a solution. I think it's really helpful and kind of fast track that approval process.
Yeah.
Should organizations have a work from home policy? So I can imagine most organizations are just winging it. So do they need a work from home policy, and what are some key inclusions?
Yeah, definitely. And I think absolutely most businesses are winging it at the moment. And the general consensus is that there's going to be a little bit of grace for this unprecedented time, but also those responsibilities do continue. So I think, especially if you've got a larger volume of employees or people that aren't used to working from home, then I think it is probably a good idea to have some kind of guidelines or policy or something in place. There's a few people that have some really good free ones. Law Squared has they've got like a COVID-19 policy, which includes some working from home information in it. So you can jump onto their website and get that one. Employment Hero as well is another company that is producing a lot of free COVID related resources at the moment. And they've got a working from home policy in there. But I think the key things to cover off is expectations, so making sure that people understand that it is still work, just because you're at home. It's kind of like, I was thinking the other day, just saying to someone, it's kind of like at school when you got to wear free dress and you didn't wear your uniform, and everyone's just like, woo, like we don't do anything that we used to do before. But obviously we're still expected to do the work that we were before. So setting those expectations, setting expectations around how often people will be communicating and how, when they will be like available and online. Is that still their normal work hours, or are we looking at being able to have some flexibility with that? Some of that will be on a case by case. Making sure that people have appropriate insurances, that they've got coverage for having all of this work stuff that they brought home, that they've got some contents insurance that they would need to sort out themselves. And obviously making sure that people are reporting any injuries or incidents as soon as possible. That kind of stuff is normally in one of those policies, so that if someone is injured or something happens, that there's an expectation that they're reporting that, so that their employer can deal with that, probably like, oh, what do we need to do here? But that they can start to work through that as that happens as well.
Beautiful. So we've just got a question from Kat. She wants to know, so what she said is, I've heard people talk about the third space and creating a way to prep yourself for the workday. Do you have any suggestions on this for people to engage well within their workday rather than rolling from bed to their workspace?
Yes, I love this. And I think that especially for people that used to commute, even if that was like a drive, using like that work time or that commute time to do something for yourself that kind of gets you, has exactly that, from kind of sleeping to work time, whether you use that 15 minutes, half hour, whatever it might be, to meditate, to look on Instagram, to listen to a podcast, kind of whatever it is for you to kind of get you into a different space. I think kind of trying to keep your day as close to what it would have been at work at home, and using that time when you would have been commuting, instead of just extending your work day, using that time to do something for you that starts to move you into a headspace for work, which might be meditating, podcasting, probably some of the things that you might have used to have done on your commute. Doing some of that in that time, I think, is a good practice. Or it might be stretching or something to kind of get you ready for a bit of hunching over the laptop for a few hours.
I did that today purely because I was going to be on camera today. But it makes a lot of difference. Like, I woke up, I did my hair and makeup, I listened to my podcast, had my coffee, like a normal work day Carly would do.
Yeah.
And like by the time I get to my laptop, I'm feeling ready, versus my normal brain's like, well, I don't have to commute, so that's more time I can work.
Yeah. Or more time you can sleep for some people. Or some days.
Yeah.
And I think being realistic about the fact that probably you're not going to want to wake up and do that whole process every day.
Yeah.
But by having that expectation, then you can kind of give yourself a break every now and then. But I think, kind of going through those motions, getting yourself prepared and in the headspace that you normally would, gives yourself a bit of a head start. And like I said before, having a dedicated space that is your workspace helps you to kind of get into that frame of mind as well, of like, okay, now that I'm sitting here, this is where I do my work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And another question, how do we avoid getting distracted by chores at home? Now, I don't personally have this problem, but it is a question that came through.
Yes, I'm similar. I'm like, oh, got to work, can't do anything.
Maybe the fridge I get distracted by, but not.
Yes, like, what am I going to make for lunch? And then doing that. And yeah, again, I think I'm trying to stick to that routine as much as possible. And I think like most awards have, like, you get a tea break and a lunch break and maybe an afternoon tea break. So I guess if you think about, you could put a load of washing on in your tea break. And if you want to use your lunch break to hang that out, that's kind of up to you. But I think, again, trying to keep to that routine. Imagine basically that you're not at home and you don't have those options. I think we're kind of in the luxury kind of position at the moment where the weekends, we're also just at home. So you can kind of leave that stuff to the weekend if possible. Otherwise, just, kind of, I guess, structuring it into your day. If you're like, I really need to get the bathroom cleaned before I feel like I can get anything done, set aside that time in the morning, get that sorted, and then get into your work day, I think. So either like blocking the time in or just not doing it when you're meant to be working.
Yeah. And how can we support parents? I'm very lucky. I just have to manage myself right now, and that feels like a full-time job. So how can we support parents who are working from home and now have their children home with them full-time too?
Yeah, so this is a really tricky one, and I am not overly qualified to comment on this because I'm also just trying to manage myself and my dog, and that's enough. But I think there's quite a few different things that people are kind of putting in place. There's a few awards actually that Fair Work is making some changes in to essentially extend the span of hours, which is essentially so that parents can try and manage their work day a bit more easily. So now I think it's the Clark's Award is starting from 6, the span of hours is like 6 a.m. till 11 p.m. that they're saying people can do their ordinary hours without kind of getting overtime and things. So essentially you can potentially work with a partner or work around kids going to bed and or waking up and shift your kind of work day to a different part of the day. And obviously that's working with your employer and depending on the demands of your job and meetings and things like that. But being able to say, okay, I'm going to do a 3-hour block in the morning and then a 5-hour block in the evening is how I'm going to be able to try and manage my day. As well, realistically, people are going to just have to be a bit more flexible in general. There's going to be meetings where there's kids sitting in the meeting as well, or they're kind of playing on the side. And I think most businesses are going to be able to adjust to that and be pretty flexible with that anyway. And I think if there's ways that you can start to incorporate kids into some things, then that will make it a little bit more fun for everyone and make parents feel a bit less like it's a burden on everyone. So I saw a couple of people online, one from Havas actually, who had their kid was literally running a meeting. They were like standing in the background and their kid was like, okay, now you need to do this and this. And obviously that was just a fun kind of 5 minutes of the meeting. But I think by incorporating some of that makes parents potentially feel a bit less guilty for both sides, for the work side that they feel like they're letting down, and for the kids that they feel like they're not kind of being able to pay enough attention to, kind of by crossing over those worlds where possible. And obviously for fun team meeting stuff, that probably works. So I think, yeah, it's realistically going to just have to be just try it and see, but that extension of span of hours is definitely a way that people can work. If both parents are home, they can kind of stagger their work days to try and give some of that coverage, and otherwise it's just a bit of a free-for-all.
My lunch has just arrived. I guess for that point as well, it's kind of like giving a window into your home to be like, yes, I've got a full-time job, but I've also got these competing priorities,
Yeah.
Which then in turn makes your team members more compassionate, I guess, and understanding.
Yeah.
That's definitely a good idea.
Yeah.
And what are the best ways to encourage social interactions within the team? So I know we touched on this, but what are like 5 really quick tips for that?
Yeah, so I think obviously having the technology available is one thing. So things like Zoom, not everyone might be able to pay for Zoom, but if there's things that the team's already using like Slack or Teams that are kind of integrated into other things that they're doing, there's obviously free versions of all of these things as well. So if people, like if the business isn't in a position to be able to support it, maybe managers can set some things up for their team so that they can have one-on-ones. So having the tech there is obviously a big part. Allowing the time and kind of giving that some importance within the day, because obviously if people don't feel like that's a good use of their work time, then they're potentially not going to engage in it. But by kind of setting time aside, whether it's every day or every week, that people are expected to be interacting, and that's okay, and that's part of what work is, then I think that's more likely that people will do it. And as I said before, I think sometimes managers might need to like facilitate that to start with. So say, okay, Jimmy and Sally, you guys are getting together and you're going to have a coffee, and here's 3 questions that I want you to ask each other to learn a bit more about each other, which might be what's your favorite movie and your favorite food, and what's the most fun thing you've done in isolation, whatever. It might be those kind of things to kind of kickstart some of that conversation. If it's people that might not otherwise be connecting and kind of having those conversations.
Yeah. Something we're going to do every day. Well, we definitely don't do it every day, but Kayla, my team member, and I, we have lunch together.
Yeah.
It's something we used to always do in the office and kind of have time where it's just the 2 of us bonding as a team instead of having Holly there as the boss.
Yeah.
And so particularly on days where we're feeling a bit down or out, we'll just say, can we have lunch together today? And we're just eating and just, I don't know, talking about Survivor or something completely unwork related.
Yeah.
Just making sure we're still connected and that communication line is open.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like I said before, trying to keep as many of like the things that you would have done at work happening when you're not at work is definitely a good thing. So if that was, you'd have morning teas, or you would go down the road and get a coffee with someone, it's like, okay, let's make our coffee and we can both like be miserable that it's instant instead of our amazing barista that we used to have, and all of that kind of stuff, and kind of just having that connection still is great. It might be, let's have, you know, a channel on Slack where we share recipes of like the weirdest things that we put together from our pantry that we didn't even remember that we had, or like just some of those things that make it a little bit more fun and yeah, kind of the non-work related stuff. Or if there's projects and things that have been on the back burner, pulling a few kind of people together to be a bit of a working committee that can work on something that maybe isn't urgent but can kind of tick along in the back, and they can have some like creative brainstorming sessions and stuff like that, I think is a good way of getting people together with a goal that they can kind of work on. Again, makes people feel like they're a part of something and they're doing something meaningful. They're less likely to kind of get disengaged and feel a bit crappy.
Yeah, 100%. And how, like, this is kind of a continuation, but how do we maintain culture when everyone's working remotely?
Yeah, I think that this is going to be a challenge, and particularly if this is going to be over many months, for businesses where their culture really was their office environment, I think it is going to be difficult. But again, culture is your people and the way that you do things. And so I think the way that you are approaching everything as you're moving your business online is going to start to probably shift your culture a bit, potentially from where it was before, but really set the tone, I suppose, for the team. So how you're talking about your customers and the services that you're going to be offering to your customers is going to help to shape the culture. How you're involving different team members in things, the communications that you're having is all going to really add to, I guess, keeping that culture alive. And I read something this morning that Community, Mel from Community, they shared this, I think yesterday, another tip about working from home, and it was really that you can't over communicate in this environment. So basically telling people things that they already know is going to be better than assuming that they know something and not telling them when they needed to know. So basically over communicating is going to be better at the moment, and I think managers probably need to lock out some time every day where they're literally just communicating with their team, whether that's an update in the morning or checking in with each of them to see how they're going, or facilitating some of those connections, both to talk about work stuff and personal stuff. I think is going to be really important to make people still feel connected to the business. Having I guess maybe a renewed strategy for the business of what are we going to be doing now that this has all changed, and we maybe used to be a very face-to-face business like you guys at Women in Digital with all of your events, and now going, okay, how are we going to service our customers and how are we going to give them the amazing service that we used to deliver, and then by connecting everyone to this like new way of working, you then feel kind of that renewed motivation to get back on track and keep going, instead of being like, oh, well, we're not going to have any events till next year. We may as well just sit here and, be upset about it. So I think connecting people back to the purpose and the why and the plans. And I think owners can be upfront. They're like, we don't know right now, but this is where we're at. This is what we're thinking. This is what we're working through, and getting some ideas from the team is probably a good way to keep them engaged as well.
Yeah. The best advice I have had over the past 2 weeks was to pick up the phone. So like, if it's an email, or usually if it's just like a message that you send off quickly, just spend that extra 5 minutes to pick up the phone. And just try and insert as many touch points with individuals as you can in a day. And like, it's game changing for me because I get those social interactions, but it's also removing any potential miscommunication. Because like, I can be quite direct. If I need something done, I'm like, oh, can you just do this? Yeah. It doesn't come off great in a message when you're not having the one-on-one time in between that. Yeah. I'm really making an effort of, whoever it is, if I can pick up the phone, and even better if I can make it a video call. Yeah. 5 minutes, but it's worth the investment. Yeah, exactly. Amazing. Have we got any more questions? Oh, here we go. Another option is engaging virtual teams, bonding companies such as Be Challenged and their Go Remote or their Infinite Loop system. I like that. Yeah. I've heard those before, so I'll definitely go research after this. Awesome. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here, guys. I do want to say thank you so much to Kateena for helping us out this morning and spending time sharing her knowledge. I know working in HR right now, she's very busy, so we appreciate it so much. Again, if you have any questions for her, please email her directly or go visit their website, clubsandwichhr.com.au. We're still Club Sandwich Co, so we're in a bit of a rebrand phase. So yeah, clubsandwichco.com, otherwise on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn as Club Sandwich HR. Amazing. That is it. Thank you again for tuning in. Spending our Friday mornings with you is always so much fun, and we look forward to doing it again in a fortnight. In the meantime, we'll connect over on socials, and don't forget to go connect with Kateena as well. Thanks, guys. Awesome. Thank you. See ya.